Welcome to Retail's Most Wanted, the podcast that examines the latest issues related to organized retail crime and how retailers and policymakers are fighting back against today's organized crime syndicates. I'm your host, Marty Carpenter, and coming up on today's show, we'll be joined by Suzie Squier. She's the president of the Retail and Hospitality Information Security and Analysis Center. Really interesting conversation that's coming up next, right after this word from our sponsors. Retail's Most Wanted is brought to you in partnership with the Attorney General Alliance, where U.S. State Attorneys General collaborate on emerging legal issues and the rule of law at home and across borders. Learn more at agalliance.com. Retail's Most Wanted is brought to you in partnership with LVT, securing physical environments through intelligent automation. Learn more at lvt.com. That's lvt.com. Suzie, thanks so much for taking some time with us today. We really appreciate you lending some of your expertise to our audience here on Retail's Most Wanted. I want to start here. Retail and Hospitality ISAC. What is an ISAC? Let's start there just so everyone's on the same page. Tell us what it is and how the RH-ISAC started.
Sure. Information sharing and analysis centers have been around for about 20 years. They're formed by a presidential directive for critical infrastructure to come together and share physical and cyber threats. So you have a lot in financial services, health, the utilities, you have communications, water, things like that. So we were formed in 2014, so we're one of the newer ISACs. We fall under commercial facility sector, under DHS, and we are formed to share cyber threats. So we focus mostly on cyber.
So you're focusing mostly on cyber. I wonder if you could tell us how the RH-ISAC facilitates the sharing of cybersecurity information and intelligence among your membership, and maybe even to give me a little bit of an idea of what your membership looks like.
Yeah, sure. So we have about 270 member companies. We focus on retail, hospitality, quick service restaurants, consumer goods, and a lot of consumer facing. So anybody that has consumer facing information would be a member of ours. So the cyber teams join. We have all you can eat. Anybody can join, even if it's outside of cyber, like fraud or sometimes identity and access management may sit outside. They can join. And what they do is share the threats that they're seeing. So if they're getting hit with something, they will share into us, and then other members can block those indicators on their side. So it helps prevent them from getting hit by the same thing. Mm-hmm. And they also share journeys. So we have a lot of working groups where you can, how do you set up an identity access management? We have one on vulnerability management. How does that work best? So our members share what they do, and it's sharing leading practices and really helping one another.
That sharing part seems to be a big part of any association that we talk to, right? And even for an event like NRF Protect, it's all about bringing the good guys together so they can share information and build networks to combat the bad guys who seem to be naturally adept at putting together an organization that goes and perpetrates organized retail crime-related incidents, right? So I'm wondering, could you just give us some insight on the importance of having secure and trusted communities for sharing cybersecurity intelligence, particularly in the retail and hospitality space?
Yeah, it's really... trust is our biggest commodity, and it's something that we treasure among our members. And it's hard to build. I mean, we're 10 years old. I helped build the organization when I was with the trade association. Mm-hmm. And it took a lot of time of really in-person meetings first to get to know one another. And, back then it was a little easier to do so. And we did have about 30 companies that came together and the leaders in the retail industry. So, the trust now, it's part of our culture. So when we bring a new company in, we bring new analysts in, they're welcomed and they just feel that trust right away. But I was talking to someone today, if you go into a new community, there's a lot of care and feeding that goes into building and maintaining, and it's something that we do not take for granted. It's something we work on every day.
Yeah, when you go to start something like that, there's like a tipping point of getting everyone to feel like, yes, this is the northbound train, this is the place to be, but then maintaining it and like making sure everyone still feels like it's the cool kids party.
Correct.
Is important.
And that everybody's welcomed.
Yeah.
And building in systems so that as we grow, we don't lose that community feeling. That is what everybody loves about our organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys were founded in 2014, so coming up on or at year
10
10,
year.
I guess. So congratulations
Thank
on
you.
making it to a decade. That's also been that's corresponded, I guess, with a huge leap in technology. And so I'm wondering, I'm curious, how has the landscape for cybersecurity threats evolved in that 10 years? I mean, we went from like everyone's barely on Facebook, right? When you start,
Right.
maybe we're a couple years into it by then, but things like Instagram and stuff don't even exist. So if people try to picture in their mind what was life like anciently in 2014, how have these threats evolved since during this 10-year period?
Yeah, we just had our summit annual meeting last month, and Rich Augustino, who's the CISO at Target, was our keynote, and he's the chairman of our board. He's great. They're a great company supporter of ours. And he was going through the 10 Eras tour, little
Like Taylor
nod
Swift,
to Taylor
yeah.
Swift.
I gotcha.
And,
I have
and
Swifty dad. That's fine. That's right.
we had little things we wore.
There you go.
whatever
Oh,
those
that's
are.
awesome. I love it.
And he was talking about what we had to deal with back then. Skimming, POS. That was a big thing. And of course, phishing has always been there. It always will be there. But then you had, then we went to, just the online, the digital space, and scraping off of websites. So you had that, how that. And then when we had, COVID, and we had a huge digital transformation happen, stores had to go to, BOPUS, if you're familiar with that, buy online, pick up in store. So folks that weren't there had to pivot to that, like almost overnight. I mean, as quickly as possible,
Sure.
And yet securely. So that opened up a lot of potential vectors, when you go into that. And now we have, obviously ransomware, and the internet and the dark web just has a wonderful opportunity for these folks to get together and have a very sophisticated system of their own. So we're dealing with that type of interaction. And I think now, of course, the keyword that everyone's talking about is, obviously Gen AI, and it has a lot of benefits that it can bring, but it also has a lot of security risks. So there's a lot of discussions around that, and how do you secure it? Cloud security is another big thing. Everyone going to the cloud, how do you make sure that's secure?
Yeah.
So those are some top areas where the threats can come through.
Couple things that you guys do, as I understand it, what I'd like to know a little bit more about. One is automated alerts, and the other are routine threat briefings that you provide for member organizations to help them stay ahead of the curve. Tell me a little bit about each of those and why those two areas in specific.
Well, our analysts, we have a great intel team, and they get alerts that from some tools that we use, and they'll see and they'll scrape and see members and non-members. So they'll look to see if there's a retailer or hospitality, a gaming casino or whomever is found on the dark web, or if there's something that they have found that maybe they're vulnerable to a vulnerability, and we'll reach out to them. And we'll just say, hey, FYI, this happened. I can give you a quick win on when that happened. We went out to one of our smaller members, because our members are all different sizes. We have teams of 2, and we have teams of hundreds. And this was one of our smaller ones. And there was found a Microsoft vulnerability that was affecting, and someone was going after them. And we alerted them. They checked. They saw it. They stopped it, and this is a small team, so to be able to get that done that quickly and to save them from a lot worse situation, they were extremely happy, and it was a huge win for our team to feel like they did that.
2014, I think that's sort of Web 2.0, right? And now everyone's talking about AI and how AI is going to change things. I was wondering, as you were mentioning, you went and found this threat. How do we get to the point relatively quickly where AI, you can essentially, a company or an organization can say, I need to use artificial intelligence to go assess my threats in a way that will help me maybe get to be a step ahead of the bad guys? I
think so. I think that's the promise of it. The bigger promise, too, is because they are so resource strapped, is how do you get rid of the noise? Can we use AI to eliminate a lot of that so that the team can focus on maybe that next tier up and deal with those instead. So that's kind of the promise of AI, and then also looking at huge amounts of data and finding what what doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And getting ahead of it faster that way.
You mentioned your team that went in and found this Microsoft vulnerability. That's sort of a success story, which is what I wanted to get. Is I wonder if you could maybe talk about, maybe I'm putting you on the spot to come up with a second example.
I got one.
Another one where you can say, hey, the work that we do went and helped this particular company by doing X.
Yeah. It's and this is great sharing from our member companies. So we have a member company who has a fairly sophisticated ability to look into the dark web, because not everybody can or should do that, you know, and obviously you need legal clearances and whole sorts of things before you go into that. And they had found a threat actor working an inside threat on them, you know, so contacting an employee to, attack their own inside. And they also found them going after other retailers or other member companies. And some non-member companies. And so what they did is they came to us and said, hey, we have found this data, this information, we want to pull this group together. And so we did what we call under TLP Red, which is like it's closed doors, it's only that group and it can't be shared. And they showed them and walked through it. And then also helped with like mitigation, like, hey, this is what we would do. This is what we plan on doing. Here's some ideas. And so they work through that. So that's just a great example of how one company, and this one company who I can't name, but they're great about that. They'll help any member company when they find information. And that's who we are. That's what we do. That's our DNA. And to be able to help these people stop something before it even happened was just huge.
You look ahead for the next 5 or 10 years. Now we're at 10 years. Let's say you look out the next decade. What are sort of the big challenges for RH-ISAC in the next decade, and how do you think you'll be able to say 10 years from now, boy, we were really successful in the last 10 years? Well,
this isn't sexy or anything, but the one thing that I worry about is the fact that, as we grow, how do we not lose that community? Because that is key to who we are, and it's not easy to get back. And when you get to 1,000, 2,000, I can pretty much name at least one person, usually the CISO or the head of all of our member companies. My team thinks that's a very strange gift that I have, and it is, but I do, and I want that. And so how do you manage that, and yet you want to grow? We want to grow internationally too. We want to. We have members in Europe and Australia and UK and other places. So how do you manage that? I think technology-wise, I really rely a lot on our CISOs, our members, and our associate members. We have solution providers. Like, what is out there? What is the next emerging threat? What's also the next emerging? Not one piece of technology is going to solve everything, but what do we need to be aware of that we can bring to our group? But our members bring us things. Like, we just started a working group on mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. And it was funny, it just came out of a session where one of the gentlemen on the panel said that's his biggest stress, is because you only know what you know. So, it's things like that members bring to us too. It's like, this is something that is a challenge for us. Let's pull a group together where we can share what works and what doesn't work in that. So as long as I have a community helping to lead me along and great people on our board to help, I'm pretty confident that we'll be looking back in 10 more years going like, we're still there.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for all of the work that you do as part of this fight against organized retail crime and in overall just providing security. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great talking to
thanks,
you.
Suzie.
Take care.
That's it for this episode of Retail's Most Wanted. Thanks to our presenting sponsors, as always, LVT and the Attorney General Alliance. Hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button so you can catch each new episode. We drop one every 2 weeks. We're also on X, LinkedIn, and on YouTube. You can find links to all of that in the show notes below. Thanks for being with us, everyone, and keep up the good fight.